Hello, and welcome to Beacon Hill Update. I'm your host, Jody Garcon, and this is the first time I've done this program, so please bear with me as I work with Millis Community Media, who very graciously has set this all up for us. Today's update is with Representative James Arena-DeRosa of Holliston. He's been a member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives for 3 years, and he serves the 8th Middlesex District, which consists of the towns of Holliston, Hopkinton, and Sherborne, which are all in Middlesex County, and precincts 2 and 3 of the town of Millis, which is in Norfolk County. So today's program, which is being recorded on September 24th, 2025, will focus on updates on the education funding from the state, funding for programs in Massachusetts that have been impacted by federal funding cuts, as well as any potential relief for utility ratepayers, especially gas and electric, as we head into the colder months. Finally, we'll hear from Representative Arena-DeRosa about the legislation that he is currently working on and any other important updates on the Massachusetts House of Representatives. Representative Arena-DeRosa, let's start with any updates on education funding over the summer. So what can we expect to see from the legislature in the coming months in terms of education funding?
Sure. Well, first of all, Jody, thank you for having me here. And it's great to have a host. It was kind of a challenge talking to the screen when it worked, but it worked out fine. So I'm looking forward to working with you, and you're doing great so far.
Oh, thank you.
So on education, so a couple things going on. The Trump administration made multi-billion-dollar cuts to education. In Massachusetts, it was going to cost us over $100 million. The Attorney General filed a lawsuit with other states. Some of that has started to trickle back to communities. A lot remains to be seen. And I know we're going to talk about the impact of federal cuts, but one of the challenges is that we continue to see pieces of it here and there. And you announced that we're recording on the 24th, but when people see this, there might be 10 more things that the Trump administration does. So we will do the best we can. I'm worried of the attacks on our research institutes and universities here in Massachusetts. That's an attack on our economy. I mean, we are in part a knowledge economy, billions of dollars at stake. Some of the medical research that's done here is so important, not just to Massachusetts, to our economy, but to our future health. Really troubled by some of that's going on. We talked about education. Let me talk a little bit about what's happened locally that's going to affect Millis. Finally, this session, we fully funded the special ed circuit breaker at 75%.
Wow.
Which means that, and by law, it's supposed to be 75%. The last couple of years, it's been 48, 52, which really hurts the small towns. Mm-hmm. I still would like us to get to 90, but at least we have funded what the law says it should be. I am still concerned, here we are, and I know the voters passed this, and I was on Finance Committee in Holliston, we live with the Mass 2.5, that towns can only raise their taxes by 2.5% without going to the voters. That's fine, that's the law. But why then can the state of Massachusetts with impunity charge the town of Millis 14% for out-of-district sped ed tuition? I don't think they should be able to do that. Every child should get what they need.
Absolutely.
I'm clear that I say that, but the state should fund the difference. How about Millis pays 2.5% and the state pays the rest if they think it should go up? So those are some things that I'm filing and working on as well.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I know the 14% or 16%, I can't remember what it was, in 1 year was a big hit to the town of Millis and really affected our ability to fund the schools. It created some cuts, so that's great to hear that the legislature is looking at funding that at least to the 75%. I mean, your lips to God's ears with the 95%, but we'll see. Has there been any progress on the foundation budget study?
That's going to take a while. I know I supported that. It was one of the first things I thought we needed to do. And I talked with people that were involved in when we did ed reforms years ago, like 90s, and then another version in the early 2000s. And I said, gee, and I understand, I get it. We had communities in Massachusetts that were severely underfunded, with the gateway cities especially.
Yep.
But what Massachusetts did is they said, okay, we're going to take care of these really poor communities, and then everyone else is going to be the same. And what I keep saying is, look, I get it. We're not Lower Lawrenceville, but we're not Weston either. My towns are in the middle. So I thought there should have been a graduated system which said, if you really need a lot of money, we're going to give you this much. But then if you're kind of in the middle, we're going to give you some sustainable funding to keep you going. And then if you're really, really rich, we're just going to give you a little bit. Instead, they treat everybody in that second category, which I don't think it was wise the way they did it. But we'll see. It's going to take a while for them to look at it. Of course, it always involves money, but we'll see.
Anything else in terms of education that is that we can expect to see for the next legislative session?
We'll know more as we get into the next year. I think there are those of us that are pushing for the 90% reimbursement. We'll see. I had a really good meeting with the collaborative, the SPED Ed collaborative in Walpole, which Melissa's part of. And because one of the questions I've had, why isn't there more cooperation and collaboration?
Right.
You talk to parents, they would much rather have their kids, if they need special attention, to be local, maybe bus them to town over instead of sometimes an hour, 2 hours away. It's also sometimes costing the town $200,000.
Yep.
And I keep thinking, if we were in another part of the country, we'd all be one big school system. Why aren't there centers of excellence where, depending on your school and your expertise and your teachers, you can deal with these specialties or maybe move teachers around? I just think we need to be more creative in the way we approach things.
That sounds great. Well, now let's discuss the question on everyone's mind as we head into the colder months. The cost of gas and electricity. The governor keeps promising to do everything she can to drive down energy costs, but nothing seems to get done. Last week, the utility companies filed for winter season rates for natural gas that would increase monthly bills to as much as 17% for Eversource. Massachusetts residents already pay the third highest electricity rate in the nation. So what is the legislature working on to provide some relief to ratepayers?
So it's really appalling what they asked for. And utility rates, it's so interesting, and I'm learning more about it, but I have to tell you, I got sticker shock myself when I looked at my, what is going on? But here's part of the problem. For anybody who's looked at their bill, you try, what is it that I'm paying for? Because when this all happened, and it continues to happen, the utilities are screaming, oh, it's all the mass save energy programs, that's why your bills are so high. And then the activist groups are saying, no, it's corporate greed, that's why your bills are so high. And I step back and say, I want to know what's really going on. Now, truth be told, the energy saving programs that we have do cost about 10 to 12% of the increases. 85% of the increases are corporate greed, corporate decisions on how they act. One of the things that I've asked is, and I've talked to the auditor, state auditor, and also to the chair of the committee that oversees the utilities, I'm like, let's at least have transparency in the billing. Why isn't it really clear? How much do our programs cost for energy saving? Let's be honest about that, and let's have a debate. Maybe we do have to cut them back a little bit to give some pay relief, right? But then let's also, how much is just profit? How much of it is, part of it is that the utilities get paid to fix if there's problems. We certainly want gas leaks to be filled.
Right.
But they then can decide where to go fix, and then they charge it back to the tax. And there's some gaming that goes on in that. Who's looking at that? Here's what I just want to say. A lot of people get really nervous when they hear government regulation, right? And the reality is, it's a private entity that is not regulated. There's a little bit of regulation. We have some oversight of it. And this is where, I support the capital economy, but we don't have an unfettered capitalist economy, right? We don't let 10-year-olds work on lathes because they were losing legs 100 years ago in arms, right? So I think for certain things, we should accept and acknowledge that it's important that there's a certain amount of government regulation, and we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that. And so we'll see what happens, but some of it is the way it's structured and set up in the first place. So.
And one of the things that I have heard from other residents is understanding that the towns that have their own electricity companies or power companies are paying substantially less in electricity than those of us who pay Eversource. Yeah. And so it can't just be that it's the cost of transmission or there's something else that's going into that cost structure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Well, but the towns that do it don't have a profit motive. They're not.
Well, exactly.
Right. I mean, right. And it's interesting because I lived in a town once, just for a few years, that had their own power. It was fascinating, right, that they were able to do that. And one wonders, it's probably too complicated now for towns to do it. But it did evolve in certain places. The other thing to remind people right now is that around energy costs, most of the electricity we get is from burning oil and fossil fuels, right? It's not So we get a little bit from hydro. So it's a complex problem. I think we need to be thoughtful about how I want us to transition to clean energy. It's really important, but we need to be thoughtful about the way we do it. I'll give you an example. I was in a briefing by Eversource, and they're talking about the wind power that we're going to get, the kilowatts, the huge, like multi-gazillion megawatts. So it's huge, huge amount of money, probably more than any part of the country. And I'm sitting, I'm like, well, this could be really good for Massachusetts. I said, but it's going to take quite a bit of effort to get it transmitted all across Massachusetts. So I had our staff set up a briefing with them, and I said, I just want to understand, what is it going to take us to get that power from where it is all across Massachusetts? And they said, we need about 18 to 20 substations all across Massachusetts. I said, okay, so that's siting issues, that's local permission, that's debate. It's going to take us a while, and we just need to be smarter. It's going to take time. We have to do it. We can't ignore it. And I think sometimes we've gone too fast, but we'll see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've also heard some questions about how Massachusetts will be stepping up to help food assistance and nutrition programs in the face of federal funding cuts. September is Hunger Action Month, and over 1 million Massachusetts residents rely on SNAP assistance. I see that you have sponsored and co-sponsored some bills related to food assistance and hunger alleviation. So what are we likely to see regarding government assistance in the coming months for our neediest neighbors?
Sure. Let me if I may, just answer broadly the question, and then we'll get to the specifics. And if I don't get deep enough, you can let me know. Because we continue to assess the impact of federal cuts. It's all still happening as we speak. And the governor set up a system that we could monitor it. We have a committee in the House that's looking at the impact of federal cuts on the Massachusetts economy. I have a great relationship with the chair, and she's had some great meetings. We had business community come in, others come in. I met literally yesterday, and I said, this has all been really great. I think we need to sit down and have those that are delivering frontline services around health and hunger and mental health and social services, because those are going to be massive cuts to Massachusetts. We need to understand them. We need to understand the impacts. The cuts they're talking up to $15 billion. We're not going to be able to cover them all, but we have to be strategic about what we do decide to fund. And this is where some of the food programs come in. And I happen to have a background. Under the Obama administration, I was the head of USDA regional food nutrition in the whole Northeast. So I have pretty good familiarity with programs. The Speaker of the House, Ron Meyer, appointed me to the Governor's Task Force on Hunger, the Anti-Hunger Task Force. I'm very proud of that. Actually, haven't even put that out on my social media yet, so you're the first one to hear this.
Nice.
But it's really important. We're already sort of rolling our sleeves up and talking with the governor. There's a couple things that we need to do. First of all, as it was, never mind what's happening with the federal government, food insecurity was increasing in Massachusetts,
Absolutely.
right? And you know that, you're aware of that. And so we weren't meeting needs. I talked to local pantries, local food banks, the larger regional banks. They are underfunded. They aren't getting enough food. So I want to support more money into MEFAP just so we can get food out to people who need it. That just gets them from today to tomorrow. Mm-hmm. A huge issue that's coming, and this gets a little esoteric, but I know some of the details because of my background. So right now, the SNAP program, unfortunately, and this is not good for Massachusetts, 1 out of 2 people that are calling DTA for SNAP assistance are not having their phone call answered.
Right.
So what does that mean? That means, first and foremost, people that need food aren't getting help. That's just not good. We need to, of in itself, we need to deal with that. On top of it, though, the error rate in Massachusetts continues to grow, and under the new federal regulations, we're already going to lose $50 million because they're going to require the Commonwealth to pay more of the administrative costs for SNAP. Every state's facing that. Yep. But embedded deep into the law, and this is where a lot of us I've followed it more closely because I have some background into it. If Massachusetts does not get its error rate down to 6%, it's going to cost us $400 million in penalties that we're going to have to pay. Wow. And I'm literally sitting down with budget people, letting them know, we need to put more people on DTA staff. Now we have to staff them up. We have to get them on the phone so they can respond to people. And again, so we can help people, but that also so we don't get penalized. The other thing is, and the retailers are very supportive of this, the grocers, 20% of the money that's spent in Massachusetts on groceries is from SNAP. This is a multi-billion-dollar program. Yeah. So to change it all of a sudden is really going to sort of send our system and gyrate the system. So we want to make sure that every SNAP dollar that's out there, we're accessing, for the economy, for the people who need it. So we'll see what happens. So I've been pushing. I've got a couple different pieces of legislation. One is to just say to DTA, tell us what you need. And sometimes they're reluctant to do that because they're part of the governor's administration, but let's at least know. But the other is, I think when we have our next supplemental bill, we have supplements a couple times during the year, I'm just going to put in money and say, listen, we've got to staff now in 25, 26, so we don't hit this huge error rate in 2028. When I was having oversight of these programs, I was in the federal government, but we had oversight of Massachusetts. The error rate in Massachusetts was 4.4%.
Wow.
So we can do better, and we have to do better for the people who need it, but also for our economy.
What are the other federal programs that we're looking at seeing cuts where the state is looking at how they can step up, how they can be that bridge between folks who need services and the programs that the federal government has been backstopping?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest ones is around healthcare. And we stand to lose up to 350,000 people that are covered right now by Mass Health will be cut. Something I want to say to everyone, just so they're clear, because I meet people who say, oh, I hear they're going to cut Medicaid, but I'm okay, I'm on Mass Health.
Right.
And I say, wait, you need to understand something. Mass Health, yes, is a state program administered by the state, but it is primarily funded by the federal government. Mm-hmm. So if people lose their Mass Health coverage because of this is the Trump administration cutting Medicaid. And we just need to be, that's just a fact. That's not a political debate. It's just how the system is going to work. We're trying to do what we can and looking ahead, and we've already done a few things. I mean, Massachusetts is limiting prescription co-payments. That's been put in place. The governor has kind of established our own approach to vaccines. Look, I'm glad that we're going to have vaccines available here in Massachusetts. People don't want to. That's a prerogative. Mm-hmm. I'm old enough to remember kids not too much older than I was who got polio. Right? They were walking around and became permanently disabled, some of them, because of polio. By the time I was in school, we were taking the vaccine, and none of my cohort got polio. So I think those vaccines are really important. HHS in Washington, CDC has a different perspective. So we're going to have our own system in collaboration with other states around New England, most of them. And I think that we're going to use science-based evidence to decide what's important and what isn't important. And then people can still make their own choices along the way. But that's something else that's going on. The other thing related to health that I think is really important is we are shoring up the community health centers that we have in hospitals. I happen to grow up in Walpole. Norwood Hospital was the closest hospital. It was pretty close to Millis. Yep. They're closed.
They have been.
And I'm really worried about, Metro West in Framingham and then Milford, I think it's called UMass Memorial now, in Milford. We need to keep those open. So both of those centers are getting money in this bill we just passed. The governor, $234 million to protect our local community health system as we go through this. We may need to do more, we'll see. But I think a lot of it remains to be seen. It's why, somebody who runs the connector from Massachusetts, I was in contact with them, and I'm like, you got to come talk to our committee because we need to understand the ramifications. We're going to have to make choices. We're not going to be able to do everything, but let's at least make informed choices about what's before us.
What is the biggest concern that you're hearing from constituents right now, and how is the legislature addressing that?
Yeah. So the biggest one that I hear is the cost of living. Yeah. Right? It comes up in many, many conversations. Now, inflation, that's national, that's the national economy, that's the federal government. I do think where we can do more is around housing costs. We've kind of dropped the ball for 25 years, so it's going to take us a while to get back. We've got to invest more. Allowing people to build ADUs will help, but I talk to potential first-time home buyers, seniors on fixed incomes that maybe want to downsize. I'm particularly worried. And when I was coaching Little League, we had a firefighter was a coach, a teacher was a coach. People that now kind of want to come work for our towns, they look at the dollars, they can't afford to live here. And when we passed, and I wasn't in the legislature when the MBTA Communities Act got passed, some debate about it, whether it's good or bad, but what I said is, why didn't we put in provisions that said, okay, and 20% has to be set aside for seniors, veterans, first responders, first-time buyers. They didn't do any of that, which I thought was unfortunate. So they're building, some housing will get built, but not affordable housing, which is a huge issue. I do think people worry about taxes. We passed the biggest tax break in a generation in this past session, which I'm pleased with. I think that's going to help businesses and families. We doubled the senior circuit breaker. I probably want to come to a session on that as we get ready for tax season. I think that helps, but I still think the senior center cohort is particularly, especially if they're on fixed incomes, is squeezed, and maybe we can do a little more around that or look at opportunities on what we can do. But that's what I hear about, and we'll do what we can in certain areas, but it's a challenge.
What are the additional areas that you are focused on Beacon Hill this legislative session?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned the hospital bill that we passed, which was good. I've got a couple of my own bills that I'm pushing that I can talk about, and then I want to come back to one really important area that we're trying to improve. But in terms of legislation, I've filed legislation to stop using PFAS-laden sludge in our farmlands. Yeah. Because the PFAS is getting into the soil. As people in Millis know, PFAS in the water is not a good thing, and it's costing us millions so many towns around here. Now we're realizing that it's not good for the food supply. We need to do something about it, but we have to do it in a way that's smart so we don't hurt our farmers and put them out of business. I traveled to Maine and talked with some legislators and farmers, and they came up with a pretty good system, which was they could stop using the sludge, but then they've also set up a fund for farmers. If your land is beyond repair, and you have to come off the land and it can't be used for agriculture, they're going to indemnify those farmers. They're going to provide them some funding so we can keep them whole, maybe get them back to their livelihoods. They can get back on the farm again, depending. I think there's a lot of interest in that. We realize it's an important public health issue, but it's also an economic issue for those farmers, and they're an important part of our economy, and local food is healthier than any other food, and let's keep it that way. I mentioned the DTA bill briefly, but basically the essence of that is that DTA needs to tell us what do they need to make SNAP an efficient program. So I literally have legislation that requires them to report to us, because I think that'll give us a little pressure on them to do it. There's one area that I really want to mention, and I've done some advocacy with the chair around labor. I'm very concerned that people who find themselves unemployed are having a difficult time getting through to the Department of Unemployed Assistance. I am getting so many calls about it, and
yeah, I know of families that have waited 10, 12 weeks for the first check.
Yep.
And
yeah.
in the meantime,
Yeah.
Who's paying the rent? Who's paying the mortgage?
It is unacceptable, and so I'm going to say this, and we'll say it later too when I give my give DUA a few weeks,
right?
But 3 months, 4 months, unacceptable. It's unconscionable. Call my office, and we will call and get your application put higher up in the list. Anybody in Millis, if you're a constituent, call me. If you're not sure, if you're in precinct 1 and not sure where you are, we'll pass you on to Marcus' office. I'm sure they'll be happy to help. It's really bad, and it's getting worse. And they supposedly, we've had briefings with them, we've had oversight hearings, and I've talked to the chairs and said, well, this is a systems failure. Nobody's
Absolutely.
perfect. Any state agency in the Commonwealth, something here or there, a file gets lost, we make a call. Okay, those things happen. No one's perfect. I tracked in my first term, and we're tracking it again, constituent calls around sort of problems that they're having with mass agencies. And this DUA showed a huge number of cases. And I talked to the chair of Ways and Means, the next presumptive speaker downstream, and I said, this is a systems issue. We really have to fit. They've got to get after this. I said, and as you said, people live pay to paycheck. I mean, there was a time in between, just before the 2008 economy rock bottom, I was on unemployment for a little bit. It's scary. And you don't know how you're going to pay your mortgage, you're going to pay your stuff. I think it's really important that those checks get to people within a reasonable amount of time. So again, when we give I give my contact info later. If you know of someone, tell them to call me. If you are having an issue, call me, email me. It's very confidential. We just, we'll be in touch with DUA around your case. But I'm hearing it from a lot of different places.
The applications are just sitting. They're not even being reviewed for at least 8 weeks.
It's not good. Now, one thing they're doing is they're supposedly triaging that, and they have a special unit that's looking at new apps coming in. So we'll see how they go. And they also are putting in a new system that can automate some of the information as it gets in and set up. But this has gone on way too long, and this is this is the administration. I mean, we're legislators. We can try to push around as we can, but I think as an executive office, they really need to deal with this problem. Here's what's scary about it, Jody. Unemployment's not particularly high right now. We've had times when unemployment has been double what it is. What's going to happen if they're having these failures when unemployment where it sits around 4 or 5%? What if we go to 8, 9, 10, and then we have a recession? Then what? So we really got to get this fixed. So.
I know employers are also concerned about the employment system. Has there been any talk on Beacon Hill about fixing this deficit?
Yeah.
That the discussion has been that businesses are going to have to make up that deficit when we're already paying some of the highest rates for unemployment insurance in the country?
So last session I was on small business and I had a lot of meetings, and first of all, it's important that when people are on unemployment, they get support. We're not saying that shouldn't happen. There needs to be smarter discussions about what we do. Now, as you may recall, the Baker administration made two $2 billion mistakes. And that's part of what's going on. It's not all of it, but it's a big piece of this. And one $2 billion mistake was they should have given the money appropriately, but they took it from the wrong place. Well, that's going to be made up by the fund. The second $2 billion mistake, they gave unemployment funds to people who were not eligible.
Right.
The state decided, in its wisdom, partly in its wisdom, if you didn't lie, if you didn't commit fraud, they indemnified those people. Fine, we're not going to claw back the money. If you committed fraud, they went after them.
Sure.
But then the question is, who pays for that? Why does business get stuck with that? It's not fair. It's not right. We have an $8 billion rainy day fund. Maybe it's time to tap some of that. And you can't keep squeezing businesses. And then I had some other ideas that I sort of put forward for consideration. It really hurts small business. I know small businesses that have never laid off somebody, and their rates keep going up and up and up.
This is what happens with the company where I work.
Yeah, right. So one of my ideas was, okay, you want to tell Walmart and Amazon they have to pay a little more into the pot, but why don't we say your first 25 or 50 employees are exempt from any increases, right? Why don't we think about that so we're not hurting small businesses, which is really the backbone of our Massachusetts economy. I mean, we have these huge corporations, but most of our businesses are small and need support. The other thing, and look, being transparent, I'm an old union guy, support labor with a lot of things. There was a commission in 2020 that even then they knew that the fund was going to start running out of money. And by design, and I thought this was a mistake, the commission could only look at extending benefits and how much companies paid. It could not look at curtailing benefits, limiting weeks, well, come on. If you're going to have a commission, put everything on the table for conversation. I'm not saying what the answer should be, but let's be fair about the process. And I heard that, and I'm like, that, because I had asked some of my friends in the business community, I said, should we just do a commission to look at this? They said, well, they did that last time, but before we even started, they tied our hands. So I think we need to have another commission with no parameters. We have a problem. We're going to run out of money if we're not careful. We don't want the system to run out of money. What do we need to do? Are there things that we can do? And maybe it's a combination of things. Maybe business is going to have to pay a little bit more. Maybe it depends on the size of your business. Maybe they're going to have to curtail benefits. Maybe it's going to be not so much. We can't just not deal with it. And that's kind of how it's been not dealt with. So we'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us here in Millis and share some of your legislative work that you're doing this session. If folks have additional questions for you, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
So the best way is to use my email, because then we won't lose it and we'll get tracked to my office. So send me an email directly to me, james.arena-derosa@mahouse.gov. My phone number, if you want to call it, which we can also put, is 617-722-2810. Please, if you're not sure, is this a state issue? Is it local? We will help you navigate it. Maybe it is federal. We'll get you to that office. Maybe it's local here. We'll put you in touch with somebody locally. If it's something we can help you with, we are happy to do that. Jody, thanks again. It's great to talk with you. So glad you're here as host, and looking forward to future conversations with you.
Likewise. Well, that's it for this session of the Beacon Hill Update with Representative James Arena-DeRosa. Thank you so much for joining us. And please send any questions you may have for our next update to Millis Community Media at milliscommunitymedia@gmail.com. Thanks so much.